My name is Harper Lane, and sometimes I still hear their laughter. It echoes in my head on quiet mornings, the same way it did years ago when I held nothing but a rusty toolbox and a heart full of shaky dreams. But today is different. Today, I'm standing in my office, glass walls stretching high above the city, sunlight spilling across polished floors. Outside, the steady hum of machines from my factory floor rises like music. My factory, the very thing they once said I could never build. I smooth the silk sleeve of my blouse, the fabric cool against my skin, and take a slow sip of coffee. A bitter roast, just the way I like it. My phone buzzes on the desk, its vibration sharp against the silence. When I glance down, my breath catches. The name glowing on the screen drags me straight back into the past, a past I've kept buried under layers of success, lipstick, and perfectly pressed suits. It's my brother's name. The same brother who once called me the girl with useless toys. The same brother who told everyone at the dinner table that I was wasting my life, that no man would ever take me seriously. For a moment, my chest tightens. I can almost feel the heat rising in my cheeks like I'm 20 again, sitting there with shaking hands, trying to hide the sting of humiliation. But then I glance at the window, at the reflection of the woman I've become. My lips curve into a smile, calm and certain. Let him call. Let him come. Because this time, he'll be stepping into my world. I wasn't always this woman. Before the glass office and polished heels, I was just a 20-year-old girl in a small Ohio town with calloused fingers and a stubborn streak that most people mistook for foolishness. Back then, I lived in my parents' creaky old house, in a bedroom where the wallpaper was peeling and the smell of engine oil clung to the air. Because instead of makeup palettes or posters, my shelves were stacked with wrenches, screwdrivers, and scraps of machines I couldn't stop tinkering with. I still remember the night it all came crashing down. Dinner table. My mom's casserole steaming between us. My brother, Ethan, leaned back in his chair with that smirk he'd perfected since childhood. "So," he said loudly, waving a fork in my direction, "Harper thinks she's going to build a business out of her little toy set. Tell me, sis, how many people want a girl who plays with tools?" The room erupted with chuckles. Even my father pressed his lips together to hide a smile. My face burned. I could feel every beat of my heart in my throat, like it was choking me. My hands trembled under the table, nails digging into my palms, so no one could see. "They're not toys," I whispered, though my voice barely carried. Sure, Ethan laughed. "Maybe one day you'll fix hair dryers for a living. That sound like success to you?" The laughter stung worse than the words. I wanted to scream, to slam my fists, but instead, I swallowed the hurt until it burned my chest. That night, I fled upstairs and collapsed on my bed, tears soaking my pillow. I thought of quitting, of throwing the toolbox into the garage and pretending I was normal, the way they wanted me to be. But then my eyes landed on the small wooden hammer on my nightstand. It wasn't much, just an old tool my grandmother had given me before she passed. I could still hear her raspy voice. "Harper, people will laugh at the weight you carry until they see the house you build with it." I sat up, clutching that hammer in my hand like it was a lifeline. For the first time, I realized something powerful. Maybe I didn't need their approval. Maybe the very things they mocked were the things that would set me free. That night, between swollen eyes and trembling breaths, I made a promise to myself. I wouldn't just prove Ethan wrong. I would prove all of them wrong. The morning after that dinner, I packed a duffel bag with nothing more than a change of clothes, my grandmother's hammer, and the dented red toolbox Ethan loved to mock. I told my parents I was going to stay with a friend for a while. I didn't mention it was a one-way trip to Detroit, where factories roared and opportunities hid in the smoke. The first few months were brutal. I rented a shoebox apartment with peeling paint and a radiator that rattled like it was alive. I worked double shifts as a cashier just to cover rent, then stayed up past midnight hunched over a rickety table, sketching designs on crumpled paper and practicing repairs with borrowed parts. Every mistake cut me deep. Every broken gear felt like proof Ethan had been right. But each time I wanted to quit, I'd pick up that small wooden hammer and hear my grandmother's voice. The house you build, Harper. It was during one of those nights, grease under my fingernails, coffee gone cold at my side, that I met Mrs. Delgado. She owned a small repair shop down the street and caught me buying clearance tools with coins scraped from my tip jar. "You fix things?" she asked, squinting at me like she could see through the exhaustion. I nodded, embarrassed. Her lips twitched into a smile. "Come by tomorrow. I could use an extra pair of hands." That shop became my sanctuary. Mrs. Delgado wasn't just a boss, she was a mentor. She taught me how to talk to clients, how to keep records, and most importantly, how to believe that my hands weren't weak, because they were a woman's hands. They were strong because they were mine. The first time a customer requested me by name, I almost cried. The man had walked in clutching a busted motor and walked out praising that girl mechanic with the steady hands. That night, I celebrated with a 50-cent cupcake from the corner bakery, my first taste of victory. From there, it snowballed. I started saving every penny, taking side jobs no one else wanted, fixing heaters in freezing basements, patching up machines abandoned in dusty warehouses, soldering wires until my eyes burned. Slowly, my tiny savings grew into a fund big enough to buy secondhand equipment. I rented a storage unit and called it my workshop. What I didn't tell anyone, especially not my family, was how big it was becoming. On social media, I posted only the bare minimum. Blurry photos of coffee cups, city sunsets, maybe a quote about hard work. If they thought I was barely scraping by, that was fine with me. It meant I could build in peace. The day I landed my first corporate client, a mid-sized textile company needing machines restored, I sat on the cold floor of that storage unit with grease on my cheeks and laughed until I cried. I was exhausted, broke, and terrified, but for the first time I knew. This wasn't just survival anymore. This was the beginning of something big. And I was going to keep it quiet until the world couldn't ignore me anymore. It happened on a Tuesday morning, one of those crisp days when the air smells like fresh beginnings. I had just walked onto the factory floor, heels clicking against concrete, when my assistant hurried up with a message. "Harper," she said, her eyes flicking nervously, "there are visitors waiting in your office." They said they're family. I froze. For a heartbeat, I was 20 again. The girl at the dinner table, cheeks burning under the weight of their laughter. My palms itched, my throat tightened. But then I caught sight of the floor around me, rows of machines humming in perfect rhythm, workers moving with confidence, a space alive because of me. I straightened my blazer and nodded. "Show them in." When I entered the office, the sight almost knocked the breath from me. My parents sat stiffly on the leather chairs, hands folded in their laps like they were waiting for bad news. And standing by the window, examining the view with an air of false superiority, was Ethan. He turned, and for the first time in years, I saw hesitation flicker in his eyes. "Harper," my mother began softly, we didn't know where else to go. Ethan's company. It's struggling." Ethan cut in, jaw tight. "Supply issues. Machines down. Investors pulling out." I thought maybe. His eyes darted around the room, taking in the floor-to-ceiling windows, the sleek desk, the abstract art on the wall. "Maybe you could help." For a moment, silence thick in the air. I let it linger, savoring the shift, the same people who once mocked me now sitting in my office, asking for my help. I leaned back against the edge of my desk, crossing my arms casually. "Funny," I said, my voice smooth, almost amused. "I seem to remember you calling my tools toys." Color rose in Ethan's cheeks. My father looked away. My mother twisted her wedding band nervously. I gestured toward the window. "Do you hear that hum? That's 200 machines running without a hitch. This factory doesn't just produce parts. It produces paychecks, livelihoods, futures. And all of it built on those same toys you laughed at." Their silence was answer enough. I walked slowly to a framed photo on my desk, Mrs. Delgado and me, grease-stained and grinning on the day I signed the papers making me sole owner of Lane Industries. My thumb brushed the frame as I turned it toward them. "You see," I continued, my voice firm but steady, "I don't just work here. I own it. Every square inch, every machine, every patent with my name on it. The girl you laughed at, she built this. My mother's lips parted, tears welling in her eyes. Harper, we didn't know. You didn't want to know. I interrupted softly, but with steel in my tone. You wanted me to fail, because it was easier than believing I could succeed without your approval. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. For once, he had no smart remark, no smirk. Just shame. I let the silence stretch, then finally crossed the room and poured myself a glass of water. My hands no longer trembled. My heart no longer raced. I had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that it was here, it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. I set the glass down and faced them fully. So, you came here today expecting to find the same girl you mocked. But she doesn't exist anymore. I swept my arm to take in the factory below, the office around us, the empire I'd built. This is who I am now. Their eyes told me everything. Disbelief, guilt, and something else they could never admit out loud. Admiration. And, for the first time in a very long time, I smiled. I let the silence hang heavy in the office, broken only by the low hum of the machines outside. Ethan shifted his weight, the polished confidence he once carried now cracking around the edges. My parents sat quietly, eyes downcast, as if they, too, were waiting for me to decide their fate. Finally, I exhaled slowly and spoke. You came here for help. And I'll be honest, part of me wants to say no. Part of me wants to let you walk back out those doors with the same empty hands you left me with years ago. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. Not this time. But I continued, my voice softening. That's not who I am anymore. I didn't build all this just to become as cruel as the people who once mocked me. If I help you, it will be on my terms. My mother lifted her head, hope flickering in her eyes. Anything, Harper. Just tell us. I leaned forward, resting my palms on the desk. First condition, respect. From this day on, you will not dismiss me, my work, or my dreams. Not in jokes, not in whispers, not even in your thoughts. If I'm to stand beside you, you will stand beside me. Ethan swallowed hard and gave a stiff nod. Second condition, I said firmly, my eyes locking on him. You'll stop cutting corners. That's why your company is sinking. You treated workers like numbers and machines like disposable toys. You'll rebuild with integrity, or you won't rebuild at all. And if I invest, it will be under my oversight. He shifted uncomfortably, pride wrestling with reality, but eventually he muttered, agreed. I wasn't finished. Third condition. Dad, Mom, you need to start believing in me, not just when you need something. I don't want empty apologies or crocodile tears. I want you to truly see me, not as your stubborn little girl, but as the woman I became despite everything. My mother's tears spilled then, sliding down her cheeks as she whispered, We do see you now, Harper. We should have all along. I let that sink in before delivering the final term. And lastly, Ethan, you don't get a free ride. If I extend a hand, it's not charity. You'll work under my guidance for as long as it takes. You'll learn discipline, respect, and humility on the same factory floor you once said I never belonged to. His eyes snapped up in surprise. You want me to work for you? I allowed myself a small smile. Not for me. With me. But make no mistake, Ethan, I'll be the one signing your checks. The silence that followed was thick with disbelief. My father shifted in his chair, clearly uncomfortable, but he didn't object. Maybe even he knew the truth, that I had become the anchor none of them could have been. I sat back down, folding my hands neatly. Those are my terms. If you can't accept them, the door is open. But if you stay, understand this, the power dynamic has changed. I no longer need your approval. You need mine. For the first time, Ethan didn't smirk, didn't roll his eyes. Instead, he gave the smallest of nods, his voice quiet. I'll do it. And in that moment I knew. The shift had happened. The girl they mocked was gone. In her place stood a woman who commanded not just tools, but entire factories, and the respect that came with them. The days that followed were different. Ethan showed up at the factory on time, sleeves rolled, jaw clenched, but for once he didn't complain. He shadowed the floor managers, asked questions he once thought beneath him, even stayed late to study the machines he used to dismiss as junk. It wasn't easy for him. I could see the frustration, the exhaustion, but it was real. And though I didn't say it out loud, a quiet part of me respected that effort. Maybe for the first time in his life, he was learning what it meant to build something with his hands instead of just his ego. My parents, too, began to soften. My father stopped offering half-hearted advice about real jobs and instead listened when I explained expansion plans. My mother, who had once worried more about how I looked than what I dreamed, now beamed with pride every time she introduced me as her daughter, the factory owner. It wasn't forgiveness overnight. Some scars don't vanish. They fade slowly, like bruises. But I realized I didn't need them to be perfect. I only needed them to finally see me. One evening, after a long day, I walked the quiet factory floor alone. The machines rested, their hum replaced by stillness. My heels echoed on the concrete as I stopped by a small framed shadow box hanging near my office. Inside it sat my grandmother's wooden hammer, the one that had carried me through the darkest nights. I pressed my fingers to the glass, smiling softly. "You were right, Grandma," I whispered. They laughed at the weight I carried, but look at the house I built. Tears pricked my eyes, not from pain, but from a swell of gratitude for every sleepless night, every cruel word, every moment I thought I'd break. Because without them, I wouldn't have become this woman. The next morning, as workers streamed in, I stood by the entrance, greeting them one by one. Men and women, young and old, all depending on the vision I had once been told was a joke. They didn't mock me. They didn't doubt me. They trusted me. And that was more powerful than any revenge could ever be. I lifted my chin, took a breath of the crisp morning air, and let the truth roll through me like fire, steady, unstoppable, mine. They mocked my tools, but now I own the factory.